The living room felt like it was closing in on me. I was just trying to enjoy a quiet evening after work, feet up, candle lit, finally breathing, but of course, peace doesn't last long in this house. That's when Caryln showed up. My younger sister. The golden child. Dragging her husband William behind her like some mopey accessory. He looked like he'd just rolled out of bed, which honestly wouldn't be a first. And with a dramatic sigh, Caryln plopped down and said the 5 words that made my stomach drop: "We need a place to stay." Before I could even process it, my mom, Rachel, lit up like someone just told her she'd won the lottery. "Of course you can stay here," she gasped, leaping up to hug Caryln like she'd been gone for years instead of just, failing at yet another apartment lease because William can't hold down a job. "We'll make room for you, no problem." No problem? I wanted to laugh. This was our home. A tiny 2-bedroom house that I had worked my butt off to help maintain. Rent, groceries, utility bills, guess who had been paying half? Me. But that clearly didn't matter. I took a deep breath, trying not to explode. "Mom," I said as calmly as I could, "can I talk to you for a minute?" She didn't even look at me. Just waved her hand like I was interrupting something important. "Not now, Calista. We need to get the guest room ready." "Excuse me?" The guest room was my office, my escape, the only space in this house that felt like mine. And suddenly it was just Caryln's? Caryln shot me this smug little smile like she knew exactly what she was doing, and loved every second of it. That was the moment something snapped in me. I clenched my fists, trying to stay calm, but the anger was bubbling up fast. "This isn't just your decision," I said, louder than I meant to. "I live here too, and I don't agree with them moving in without talking to me first." Rachel finally turned to look at me, and the warmth disappeared. Her face hardened, her eyes narrowed, and just like that, I was the problem. "Watch your tone, young lady," she said, with that sharpness in her voice that always made me feel 10 years old. "Caryln is family. And family comes first." I stared at her, stunned. "But what about me?" I asked, my voice cracking. "I've sacrificed so much to keep this house running. And you treat me like I'm just in the way." She stepped closer, pointing her finger in my face. "If you can't accept your sister's situation, maybe you should find somewhere else to live." And that was it. The moment I realized, I didn't have a place in my own home anymore. Back in my room, the walls felt like they were caving in. The air was thick with resentment, the kind that simmers for years until it finally boils over. I'd spent so long walking on eggshells in that house, swallowing my feelings just to keep the peace, but this time? I couldn't. I had just been erased, tossed aside like I didn't matter, like my years of sacrifice meant nothing. My mother didn't even have the decency to hear me out. She made a decision that uprooted my life without hesitation, because Caryln had a problem, and that always took priority. That was the unspoken rule of our house. Caryln's needs were urgent, mine were optional. Caryln was the fragile one who needed support. I was the reliable one who didn't. The background character. The filler. I'd spent years covering bills, keeping the place running, giving up nights out, vacations, everything, just to keep things afloat. I was the one making sure there was food in the fridge, that the rent was paid on time, that the house didn't fall apart. And now? My so-called place in that home was being handed off to 2 grown adults who never once pulled their weight. My mother didn't hesitate to shove me aside, didn't even pretend to care that I was hurt. And to make it worse, Caryln wore that smug little grin the entire time, like she had finally won something. As if she was proud to be the favorite. As if watching me get kicked to the curb gave her a thrill. The betrayal in her expression was worse than anything she could have said out loud. And my mother, she didn't flinch. She didn't question it. In her eyes, I was the problem. Not Caryln with her string of poor choices and constant crises. Not William, who couldn't keep a job longer than a month. Me. I was the issue because I dared to speak up, dared to ask for basic respect in a house I helped pay for. That was the moment everything inside me hardened. The grief, the anger, the exhaustion, it all twisted into something colder. I had given them everything, and they gave me a suitcase and a shove toward the door, so I packed. Slowly. Bitterly. Every item I folded felt like proof of how much I had poured into that house, into that family, and how little it had ever been acknowledged. Every drawer I emptied reminded me of holidays spent working extra hours, of birthdays where Caryln got all the attention while I was barely a footnote. And as I zipped up the final bag, one truth echoed louder than the rest: I was never really wanted there. I was just useful. And now that they didn't need me? I was disposable. I left that night. No goodbye. No second thoughts. Just the sound of the front door closing behind me, and the weight of years of emotional neglect finally lifting off my chest. I didn't even cry at first. I was too numb, too pissed off to feel anything but rage. That kind of deep, exhausted anger that doesn't scream, it simmers. My hands were shaking as I threw my clothes into a suitcase, not bothering to fold anything. What was the point? Neat piles wouldn't undo the fact that I had been kicked out of my own life like I was nothing more than background noise. I looked around my room, the one place in that suffocating house that ever felt even remotely mine, and all I could think about was how many birthdays I spent alone while Caryln got praise for doing the bare minimum. I gave up so much to keep this household running, and for what? To be replaced like an old lightbulb the moment Princess Caryln snapped her fingers? To be told I needed to show respect while the freeloaders moved in without lifting a finger? Every drawer I yanked open reminded me of the years I spent living in my mother's shadow, constantly bending so others could breathe easier while I suffocated in silence. The only time I ever got noticed was when I made the mistake of standing up for myself. That's when I was labeled the ungrateful brat. That's when I was suddenly the problem. And it wasn't just Caryln, it was all of them. My mom, her precious golden child, and the deadbeat son-in-law she welcomed in like royalty. No one asked what I needed. No one cared. They just expected me to stay quiet, keep paying bills, and smile while they stepped on me. The moment I zipped my bag shut, I picked up my phone and called the one person who had ever shown me consistent kindness, Nora. My best friend. My anchor. The one human being in my life who didn't treat me like a backup plan. I barely got the words out, voice shaking, adrenaline still pumping. I didn't even need to explain. Nora didn't hesitate. She just said, "Come over. Right now." That was it. No questions. No judgment. Just safety. Walking out of that house felt surreal. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't leave a note. I didn't owe them that. If they could kick me out like I was disposable, they didn't deserve a damn thing from me. Not my words. Not my tears. Definitely not my loyalty. I dragged my suitcase down the driveway, each step heavier than the last, but my chest lighter than it had been in years. For the first time in a long time, I was choosing myself. Not because I wanted to, because I had to. Survival mode had kicked in, and I wasn't going to be anyone's emotional punching bag anymore. I left that house like it was on fire behind me, and honestly? In my head, it was already burning. Nora's apartment wasn't just a place to crash, it was a damn lifeline. I hadn't even unpacked fully before I felt like I could breathe again. No walking on eggshells, no backhanded remarks, no smug sister lurking in the hallway with judgment in her eyes. Just silence. Peace. The kind of quiet that doesn't make your skin crawl. And Nora? She didn't hover. She didn't ask me to rehash every detail unless I wanted to. She just handed me a warm blanket, a glass of water, and told me I could take all the time I needed. That alone nearly broke me, but instead of falling apart, I got mad, productive mad. All that energy I'd wasted trying to win the approval of a mother who treated me like an afterthought? I funneled it into myself. I signed up for a pottery class I'd always wanted to try but never had the time for, because I was too busy keeping Caryln and her man-child husband from setting the house on fire, financially or otherwise. I joined a local book club and started reading things that weren't self-help articles on how to deal with narcissistic family members. Spoiler, you leave, at work, something strange happened. I started speaking up in meetings. I pitched ideas I used to keep to myself out of fear I'd sound stupid, because that's what years of subtle, grinding emotional abuse will do to you. But turns out, my ideas were actually pretty damn good. My boss took notice. My coworkers did too. I wasn't invisible anymore. And it felt like I was finally waking up after years of being stuck in emotional quicksand. It's wild, really. The second I cut off the emotional vampire sucking me dry, I started to feel human again. Not magical. Not blissful. Just okay. And for someone like me, that was everything. I didn't have anyone criticizing the way I folded laundry or rolled their eyes when I said I was tired. I didn't have to justify why I was spending $15 on a hobby or explain why I wasn't available to drop everything for a family crisis. The bitterness was still there, sure. I'd be lying if I said I didn't picture my mother's face every time I centered a lump of clay on that damn pottery wheel. But there was something weirdly healing about it. Something about creating something, anything, with my own hands reminded me that I still had control over something. That I was building something new. Something mine. I wasn't thriving yet, not completely. But for the first time in years, I wasn't surviving just to keep others comfortable. I was finally choosing myself. And honestly, that felt like revenge in its purest form. It started with missed calls. Then voicemails. First once a day. Then 3. Then 10. I didn't even bother listening to most of them at first, just stared at the screen, watching my mother's name pop up like a roach you thought you killed but apparently just pissed off. The few messages I did listen to were full of frantic energy and fake concern, layered with just enough guilt to make it sound like I owed them something. I didn't. Not after everything. But then came the message that made me stop mid-step in Nora's kitchen. My mom's voice, tight and shaky, confessed it all. The mortgage was late. Bills were stacking up. The power company had sent a disconnection notice. And William, oh. Sweet useless William, had lost his job. Apparently, he'd been hiding debts and dodging calls from collectors while playing the role of struggling husband. Color me shocked. You let a leech into your home, and now you're surprised the blood's run dry. I stood there with my coffee in hand, listening to her voice tremble as she admitted they didn't know how they were going to make it through the month. I should have felt something, pity, concern, maybe even sadness. But all I felt was this cold, hollow satisfaction. This was the chaos I'd been cleaning up behind the scenes for years. The mess I was constantly expected to manage without thanks. And now, with me gone? It was finally all crashing down. The house of cards had lost its foundation, and surprise, surprise, it wasn't Caryln holding it up. Nora looked over at me when she saw my expression change. I played her the voicemail and she let out this low, unimpressed whistle. Took longer than I expected, she muttered. And yeah, same. I'd always known they couldn't survive without me. They just didn't realize it until their lights were flickering and the pantry was empty. I didn't call back. I didn't text. I didn't even flinch when the sob stories started rolling in. I owed them nothing. Not after the way I was tossed aside like I was nothing more than a financial convenience with a bad attitude. Let them sit in it. Let them feel what it's like to be disregarded. Let them beg Caryln to step up for once. God knows she'd rather die than work a double shift or give up her acrylics. There was no joy in it, not really. But there was justice. And honestly, that was enough for me. It was only a matter of time before Caryln cracked. I knew it the second her name popped up on my phone, attached to some random number I didn't recognize. I let it ring. Twice. But curiosity got the better of me. I figured if nothing else, I deserved the satisfaction of hearing her whimper through the mess she helped create. And sure enough, when I answered, her voice came through the line like a wet paper bag, barely holding together, trembling, pitiful. she was sobbing. Not the cute kind of cry that gets sympathy. No, this was messy, frantic, bottom-of-the-barrel kind of desperation. She begged for my help. Said she didn't know what to do. Said everything was falling apart. Said she and William were going to lose everything if I didn't step in. And I just stood there, phone pressed to my ear, listening to the golden child unravel like cheap string. It was almost poetic. I didn't say anything for a beat. I just let her spiral, let her fill the silence with all her sorries, and I didn't mean to and I was just doing what Mom told me excuses. When I finally did speak, I didn't bother pretending to be kind. I reminded her of exactly what she did. How she smirked while Mom kicked me out. How she acted like queen of the damn castle while I dragged my bags out the door. How she never, not once, stood up for me. Not when I paid bills, not when I worked double shifts. Not even when I was being emotionally gutted in the hallway by our mother's venom. She stammered something about not realizing how bad it was and wanting to make things right. I laughed, hard. That kind of laugh you let out when someone finally sees the fire they helped light burn down their own house. I told her the truth, I didn't owe her anything. She made her bed, fancy throw pillows and all, and now she could lie in it. With William. And the shut-off notices. And the rotting groceries in the powerless fridge, she cried harder. Said they had nowhere else to go. Said she was sorry, so sorry, and would do anything to make it right. But here's the thing, sorry doesn't magically glue together years of broken trust. It doesn't reverse being treated like a second-class citizen in your own damn home. It doesn't erase the fact that when I needed her, she was too busy sipping wine and pretending not to hear the screaming, so no. I didn't go running. I didn't show up with money or groceries or sympathy. I ended the call. Cold. Clear. Final. And for the first time in my life, I was the one leaving her in the dust. I never thought I'd hear the words "I'm sorry" come out of my mother's mouth, not in a real, human way. Maybe muttered under her breath when guilt forced her hand, or dressed up in manipulative nonsense like "I'm sorry you feel that way," but never real. So when the phone rang again and I saw her number, I almost let it go to voicemail like I always did. But something, curiosity? Morbid amusement, made me answer. What I didn't expect was the quiet, trembling voice on the other end. This wasn't the cold, performative Rachel I'd grown up with. This voice was cracked, tired, and, I hate to admit it, sounding a lot like regret. She started slowly, like she was afraid I'd hang up. Honestly, I almost did. But then she said something I never thought I'd hear: "I was a terrible mother to you." And for a moment, I didn't know how to breathe. This was the woman who dismissed me, belittled me, made me feel like a disposable maid in my own home, and now she was owning it. She didn't make excuses. "No, but you were difficult. No, I was just trying my best." None of that sugar-coated crap people serve when they don't really want to take accountability. She just admitted it. That she failed me. That she chose Caryln again and again, no matter how much I gave. That she kicked me out of the house I helped maintain just to make room for someone who never lifted a damn finger. I never thought I'd hear the words "I'm sorry" come out of my mother's mouth, not in a real, human way. Maybe muttered under her breath when guilt forced her hand, or dressed up in manipulative nonsense like "I'm sorry you feel that way," but never real. So when the phone rang again and I saw her number, I almost let it go to voicemail like I always did. But something, curiosity? Morbid amusement, made me answer. What I didn't expect was the quiet, trembling voice on the other end. This wasn't the cold, performative Rachel I'd grown up with. This voice was cracked, tired, and, I hate to admit it, sounding a lot like regret. She started slowly, like she was afraid I'd hang up. Honestly, I almost did. But then she said something I never thought I'd hear: "I was a terrible mother to you." And for a moment, I didn't know how to breathe. This was the woman who dismissed me, belittled me, made me feel like a disposable maid in my own home, and now she was owning it. She didn't make excuses. "No, but you were difficult." "No, I was just trying my best." None of that sugar-coated crap people serve when they don't really want to take accountability. She just admitted it. That she failed me. That she chose Caryln again and again, no matter how much I gave. That she kicked me out of the house I helped maintain just to make room for someone who never lifted a damn finger. Giving my mother a second chance didn't come with a clean slate, it came with a damn user manual. Step 1, don't pretend like everything's fine. Step 2, sit there, shut up, and actually listen for once. And surprisingly, she did. Our first weekly dinner was awkward as hell. She made lasagna like we were filming some cheesy Hallmark comeback story, and I showed up like I was attending a parole meeting. I didn't smile. I didn't hug her. I sat across from her like I was waiting for her to screw it all up again, and part of me still was, but something had changed. She didn't lecture me. She didn't deflect. She didn't start in with her usual "well, it wasn't that bad" garbage. She just listened. For the first time in my life, Rachel shut up and listened. And I let her have it. I told her about every moment I felt invisible. Every time she chose Caryln while I broke myself in half trying to keep the lights on. Every insult, every cold shoulder, every time she let me bleed for the family while Caryln floated through life in a bubble of undeserved praise. She didn't defend herself. Just nodded. Cried a little. Whispered that I was right. And honestly, that shook me more than any screaming match we ever had. Meanwhile, Caryln and William were nowhere to be seen, thank God. Rumor had it they were barely scraping by in some rundown apartment across town. No jobs, no help. No one left to coddle them. And I didn't feel bad. Not even a little. I let them rot. Let them face the reality they were so smugly shielded from for years. The golden daughter and her parasite finally had to live like the rest of us, and spoiler alert, they weren't built for it. As for me, I was thriving. Not in a performative Instagram quote kind of way, but in a quiet, grounded, don't need your approval anymore kind of way. At work, I was taking on extra projects, pitching bold ideas, and getting noticed for the things I used to be afraid to speak up about. I wasn't hiding in the background anymore, I was leading. I was being heard. Socially, I finally had the freedom to say yes to things that brought me joy. The book club, the pottery class, the friends I used to cancel on because family drama kept yanking me around. My weekends were mine again. My space was safe again. My energy wasn't being drained by people who only called me when they wanted something, and emotionally, I was still a little bitter. Still guarded. But no longer broken. No longer begging to be seen. I had built something outside their circus. And even if my mother was now trying to tiptoe back in, I had the upper hand. For the first time in my life, I was living on my terms. One night, as I was slipping on heels for a casual night out with coworkers, my phone buzzed with a message from my mom. No crisis, no guilt, no subtle manipulation, just a single text that made me stop in my tracks. I'm so proud of you, Calista. You've grown into such a strong, independent woman. I'm honored to be part of your life again. And for the first time in a long time, I cried, but not out of pain. These were the kind of tears that wash away the last layer of hurt. The kind that come when you finally feel seen by someone who once made you invisible. I stared at that message for a while. Not because I needed it, not anymore, but because it proved how far I'd come. I wasn't that girl begging to be heard in a house where silence was survival. I wasn't the emotional punching bag, the unpaid caretaker, the always available scapegoat. I was me. Fully. Loudly. Without apology, my space was mine. My boundaries? Bulletproof. I laughed louder. Spoke up quicker. Loved myself harder. And the best part? I didn't need anyone else's permission anymore. I built this life with bloody hands and sleepless nights, but I built it. And no one, not even family, was ever going to tear it down again. Mom and I are cautious. We have dinner, we talk, and she tries. That's all I ever wanted, the effort. Not perfection, just acknowledgement. Caryln? Still distant. Still living in the wreckage of her own creation. And I'm okay with that. Some people aren't meant to follow you into your healing. But me? I've never been more sure of who I am. And it turns out, she's pretty damn incredible. I've learned that sometimes the most radical thing you can do is choose yourself. Walking away from people who constantly hurt you, even when they're family, isn't cruel. It's survival. Set boundaries. Stick to them. And remember, you don't have to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. So now I'll ask you, have you ever had to walk away from someone who didn't value you? Have you ever been the black sheep who finally found peace outside the flock? Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated, hit follow, because your voice matters too, and I'd love to hear it.